Hi, today I'm going to make a Frankenbirdie. This is a Frankenbirdie. It's a plush bird that I'm making from scratch out of pieces, lots of pieces of material that have had past lives. So it's stitched together. It's easier to make it out of felt if you've got felt. But I'm using all these old materials, which are much more difficult because you can't stitch them together at the same rate. They've all got different weights and different textures, and it makes it more difficult, which is why it's a Frankenbirdie. So I'm using materials from around the house. I've got these old samplers. I've got some material that I found from India. I've got this that my aunt made for my daughter when she was a baby. My aunt has now passed, and my daughter is now 28. And I don't want to throw all these things away because I have to move house. This is my mum's house, and I have to dispose of all her things. And so instead of disposing of them, I'm trying to use as many of them as I can before they have to go, because that way I can retain a memory in a smaller piece. This is full of materials from my childhood, from my mum's closet, and it's easier to transport because the house is big and I'm going to have to move somewhere small. So come along with me. I'm going to show you my process of making a put together birdie, Frankenbirdie. And Misty's going to help too. So I'm starting off by cutting out a pattern that I've drawn, and I think it's a bit complicated, this pattern. It's got too many parts. If I was going to do this again, I would do a slightly less complicated pattern. So I'm going to draw a couple of designs, and I'll probably put a link underneath or on my website if anybody's interested in having a pattern. But this one is quite complex. I found it quite difficult to do the tiny parts. So that at the moment is my mum's curtain material. That was a leftover scrap from her curtains. She also has some cushions out of that as well. So I'm using this as a memento. So that's going to be the top piece. Now this bit is going to be a side wing, I think. Oh no, this is a side of the bird. And I've got two sides now, and those were old dresses. I'm using felt for the beak because it's stiff and I don't want the beak to be too floppy. So those are little pieces for the beak. And then this is going to be the base. This was a lace dress, quite difficult to cut and to sew, that one. This is an old sort of doily. It was an old sort of a cloth that was embroidered by hand, and this one as well, like you get embroidered hankies. These were vintage. These are like 100 years old, and they were my mum's, and I'm going to use all the flowery parts. This was a pair of trousers. So these are all parts that there's a room that we've got all the things in that have to be thrown away, and I'm trying to use them. I'm also using all her crockery and everything that she saved and didn't use during her life. So put all these bits together. Then next time I would use a different material for the feet. This one's too floppy. So instead of it standing up on them, they just flop about at the end. So when you choose your material for your beak and feet, make sure that you use something stiff if you're going to make one. I learned my lesson with this. It was an old linen piece. Right, having another go at that. Yes, cutting lace. It's lined lace as well, so it was very, very slippy. That was the most difficult bit out of all to do. And that's the bit that's on the base, and I did have problems with it at the end because of its slippiness. But I still like it because those are all the bits there. So we've got some side bits, and I've got wings as well. I've got the wings are two-part, and I'm doing a sort of, not a red breast, but a breast area as well for the bird, which I think is too complex. Next time I'd just have two sides instead of 5-part sides, and some wings. So what I'm doing first is gluing the sides together, and I'm gluing the breast piece on as well, and then I'm going to sew around the edges. I'm going to use red thread. I want it to be bright and contrasty because it's meant to be a Frankenbird. and obviously Frankenstein was put together by an amateur doctor out of pieces of other parts of beings, and that's what this is. I'm putting it together out of different pieces of different materials, and each piece has a memory for me and it means something. So I'm creating a bird out of all these different pieces stitched together. But because it's a Frankenbirdie, then I'm happy to use a bright coloured thread to show the stitches, because I want it to look like, a little bit Tim Burton, a little bit gothic, a little bit sort of rough and ready, to try and give it some style. I don't want it to just look like a factory made one, which I could probably never do anyway, because you have to be extremely neat, and I'm not a neat person. So I'm going around all the edges now, and this also acts as security. So the glue secures them together and gives me a nice firm base to sew on, and then the stitching will keep it together just in case it gets handled roughly. And I like the look. I like that crisscross mismatched stitching that Tim Burton has made so popular. So same thread throughout. So I've got the two sides together now, and I'm just attaching the pieces on top, and it gives it a security. The next bit that I'm going to do is I'm going to take the black piece and I'm going to sew it on the underneath. So the point of the black piece will go where the point, where the red piece is, where the front of the bird is going to be, and then the tail is going to go to where the point is, and the tail is going to hang out from it and then wait for the other piece to be attached on the top at the end. So the next bit I do is going to be sewing the black piece on, and I'm just going to attach it on either side and then turn it inside out so that it's stronger, so there's a more secure bond. The camera goes off just as I'm about to do that, and then comes back on just as I've finished it. So that's fine, because you don't want to sit there watching me sew a very difficult piece of slippery lace. So at the moment, I'm just going round all the edges with my crisscross red thread, and I'm deliberately crisscrossing it over the top of each other. So here's the black bit, and that's going to go attach to both sides, and that will attach them together. Right, there it is. I've now done that, and I turned it inside out. You can see it's a bit lumpy, and it's the same size and shape as the other one, which is going to go over the top. So that one's the base, and then turn it right way round, and you can see it's starting to get puffed out like a little birdie. So it's the shape of a robin or a tit, one of those little garden birds, or a chaffinch, but it's got a long tail. Now I'm putting two parts of the wings together with glue. So I've got one that's the feathery bit, and then on top of that there's a teardrop shape, which is the main body of the wing. And there's the pieces of the beak, which I'm now going to very, very carefully sew together. And again, you can see the red stitching, and I don't mind at all. Instead of switching to green, I've stuck with red to make it stand out. I'm sewing all the bits together, and then after I've done that, I'm going to stuff it with some cushion filler, which I got from Hobbycraft. So the parts that you need for this, you need some filling. I mean, if you've got any old cushions that you don't want, or old pillows you don't want, you can take the stuffing out of one of those instead of buying them. You need needle and thread, scissors, glue if you want to use it, a piece of paper to draw and cut out the pattern, or you can print one off, and then scissors and thread and an assortment of materials. Or if you want to make a neat bird, you can use felt, and you get a nice neat bird where everything sits in place and doesn't shift around and make it difficult for you to sew. One of the hardest bits to sew was this beak, because it's so tiny, and the base of the bird, which was slippy. So when you're choosing materials, go for stiffer materials first. So I'm working out where the beak's going to go, but I can't put it on yet because I've not stuffed it. So I'm going to sew together the piece at the front, and then I'm going to turn it right sides round and then add the beak and stuff it. And when I stuff it, I'm going to stuff through the top of the bird, but instead of just stuffing it a great big wide open one, I'm going to sew up about 2/3 of the way along the top of it, trying to attach that top piece, the bit that's my mum's curtains. And I'm going to sew that on as much as possible and just leave a hole, and that way I can turn it inside out again and get it looking a bit neater. Even though I want it to be raw, I don't want it to be too raw because some of the materials are they're fraying very badly, and I want to try and preserve that. So I'm sewing the feathery bits to the wing. Again, it's just a bit for security and a bit for show. I want it to show the crisscross red stitching, but I've left the tips of the wings flapping free. And I'm going to glue and sew these on, one on each side. But before I do that, I'll stuff the bird and put on the beak and the eyes. For the eyes, I'm using 2 little blue buttons that I cut off one of my mum's blue blouses. And again, every time I look at the bird, I will think of my mum. I can't keep all her blouses and clothes. She has some beautiful things. The charity shops don't really want them. Vinted and eBay and everybody doesn't really want them. And I haven't really got the leisure time to be able to spend ages waiting for the right person to find them. So I'm harvesting interesting parts from them. Bits of embroidery, buttons, clasps, that sort of thing, and then I can make things out of them. So I'm gluing the tail together, the 2 tail parts, and that helps stabilize it. And then I'm going to sew the top section onto the top of the bird, leaving a gap to stuff. I was just threading my needle then. Here we go. So sewing along one side, attaching the sections together, sewing the tail. Again, if I was doing it again, I would stiffen the tail because this is very floppy material. It's curtain material. It's relatively thick. It's sort of slightly linen-y cotton, but not thick enough for a stand-up tail. So you could put webbing in there, or a piece of cardboard even, or just use thicker material like felt. But I don't mind a floppy tail. It's in keeping with the rest of the bird. So we've got the lovely wings there. Right, starting with a bit of stuffing in the beak. So you can see it's got a fat body, a flat front, and a fat top, the little bird. And then the beak's going to go at the front there. And then I'll sew the eyes on before I put the stuffing in, because that way I can actually get inside it to pull the thread through. If you wait until the end, it might be difficult to sew them. So sewing on a beak, tiny. It's going to be a little off center, and I don't mind that. I haven't measured where it goes. I'm doing it all by eye, and that way you get a wonderfully lopsided look, and I don't mind that at all. So just sewing on a beak, little tiny beak, and I've already stuffed it. There we go. It's got a beak now. Now I'm sewing on the buttons. I think they're just the right size for a bird. They're a lovely shade of blue. And I can look at this little bird and think of Mum. One on the other side. I like the other side better. This one's a bit more drab, but then birds are like that. The males are very, very colourful and showy, and the ladies have a more sensible colouring. So perhaps it's showing both sides of the bird. It's still quite jazzy. But the next one I do, I'll probably do it mostly felt, and then just maybe do the wings or some little touches of the materials. So now that the eyes are on, I can start sewing up the top a bit more, ready for stuffing. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to put him on a stand or hang it from the ceiling. You can suspend them from the ceiling. If you've got a few, you can make a flock suspended from the ceiling like a mobile, which will be lovely. So depending on how many I make, I might go down that route. So at the moment it's just sewing on the top, and that's the same way that I did the bottom, the bit that I didn't film. Just placing it on there and attaching it along one side and then along the other side so that it makes a solid area. I find sewing very therapeutic. I mean, sometimes you get painful fingers if you've been doing it for a couple of hours. This took about 4 hours to do, 4 non-stop hours, and I've speeded it up 20 minutes. So sewing on the top section, I have to leave a gap, one to put the stuffing in, and also because you need to turn it the right way around again. Sew it inside out and then turn it the right way around. I'm doing a blanket stitch over the top of this to try and keep it secure and fix the material together. But very therapeutic. I enjoyed making this, and I enjoyed looking at all the different fabrics that I had and what their symbolism is for me. So stuffing it with the lovely lightweight stuffing that I bought from Hobbycraft, and now I'm going to put the wings on. I might adjust the base as well, because it's sticking out at a funny angle because that lacy material was very silky and moved around a lot. It all did. All the different materials were very contrasting in style and texture, and none of them sat together well at all. But I like that. That's what gives it the Frankenbirdy look. Otherwise, it would just be a bird. But this one's a Frankenbirdy. So sewing over the stuffing, keep the sides together. I love that little tail, the way it just sticks out like that. Very nice. There are times when I have to really push the needle to get through because it's quite stiff with all the stuffing and the multiple layers. And every now and again I'll push it down into the wooden table. If it gets stuck, instead of trying to pull, I think it's easier to push. So there's the top, sewing that on. Now add the wings with a bit of glue. So it's just an extra precaution, the glue. It stops it from moving around too much. When I tried doing it without the glue, the pieces just kept shifting and shifting, and you end up with a real Franken monster rather than a Frankenbird. I want it to look like a bird. So attaching the wings, I'm just going all the way around. Even though they're stuck on with glue, I like the look of the red crisscross sections. And once I've got the whole thing finished, I'm then going to adjust the bottom of it to alter the shape slightly. Things morph into things. Even if you cut out pattern pieces, they morph into other directions and other looks that you didn't expect. But because it's a Frankenbird, it doesn't matter. As long as it looks like a bird and it's pretty and it reminds me of my mum, There we go, it's looking like a bird. I'm going to take some of the bottom in because it sticks out a bit there, where that slippy piece of lace was, or still is. So this is the point now where all the pieces are together, and I'm just assessing it to see what it needs. I think there it is, finished. Looks like a bird.